Welcome to Evergreen Learning Spotlight, where we focus on the great things that are happening in the classrooms throughout Evergreen Public Schools. Normally we're joined by teachers and students, but today we are privileged to have 3 teachers from Wy'east Middle School. Let's meet them now. First is Jed Michelson, and next to him is Nicole Chandler, and next to her is Michelle Annette. And all 3 of these teachers teach humanities at Wy'east. Welcome.
Thank you.
So this summer, the 3 of you, along with a couple teachers from Covington, were able to go back to Colonial Williamsburg. Jed, can you talk a little bit about how that training came about?
Well, we were fortunate enough to receive an email, and through the process of the email, we found out about Evergreen Foundation and donation that Mr. Edward Lynch gave to the donation to send teachers like ourselves to this opportunity in Colonial Williamsburg. And after a short application process and waiting for time to go by, we found out that we were fortunate enough to attend in July. So from July 20th to 27th, we headed back and had the experience.
Now, was this at the Colonial Williamsburg that anybody could go visit, or is there a special school back there, or what? Michelle?
So it was organized through something called the Colonial Williamsburg Teacher Institute. And so, yes, we were at the same Colonial Williamsburg that everyone gets to see, but what was really so neat about it was we had a guided behind-the-scenes tour. So we got to meet a lot more of the reenactors and just got to really get into some buildings that not always the general public can go see.
A little bit behind the scenes. And it was really wonderful, too, with the Institute. You were there with other teachers from other states, and so it was nice to have a conversation with what they're doing in their classroom and get suggestions and things that you can implement in your own room.
So why is Colonial Williamsburg important to what we're teaching students?
I think what I got out of it is it talked a lot about citizenship and what we should be doing as citizens, and how, you know, going to the Institute, it was something maybe I hadn't thought about in depth, and I walked away thinking about it a lot more, and that's something that I can try to give to my students, is for them to start thinking about citizenship and things go beyond the classroom, and what can you do to contribute to our community.
So what was the whole focus of the training for you as middle school teachers?
Our focus was to think about the different tensions that exist in history and that have application to today, such as diversity versus individualism, that every day our citizens have to contend with these different tensions that exist, and if they're in history, they're going to be present now, and if we can understand them in history, we can use that wisdom that we gain from history to apply to now.
All right. So what were some of the highlights for you, Michelle?
I think for me, hands down, the reenactors. We had a presentation by a man who portrays Patrick Henry, which I really didn't know much more about him other than his famous "Give me liberty or give me death." And so to really see where the origins of his passion came from and his anti-federalism, that was fantastic. And then we also had a woman who portrayed a free black woman who had lost her papers, and her husband was refusing to allow her credit at any of the stores, so she was totally disenfranchised, and that was fascinating to see that side of history.
So now the 3 of you are humanities teachers, and it sounds like it was a lot of history. How are you making this applicable to what you're teaching students in the classroom?
The same tensions that exist back then exist now. Or for me, when speaking with the actress that played Lady Dunmore, and we're talking about rights and the privileges and the freedoms that we use nowadays, or the freedoms that we ignore, the idea of the relationship with the citizen and the government is the same relationship that we have now, but it was put in a historical setting, and it made so many items, like Patrick Henry's "I have but one lamp, by which my feet are guided." It was wonderful to be able to have that realistic application for now.
Yeah, there was a segment where we were learning about political cartoons, and it was interesting to learn about the elements that go into a political cartoon that we oftentimes see in the newspaper today. But I was able to incorporate things that you would typically do in a language arts class, of adding sarcasm and irony and how people are going to portray that, and what are you trying to convey in your image, and being able to look at historical political cartoons and what were the people of the time trying to convey to their audience, and how did they get their information spread throughout the colonies, because obviously they didn't have their emails and their text messages, and this was the way to convey their opinions.
So can you give me an example of how you've taken this information and actually used it in the classroom?
So Michelle and I did a segment that they did with us, which was about mercantilism and the trading, and Michelle did a great job of kind of putting the things that symbolize the tea or the sugar or the coffee that was being traded, and how a lot of it only had to go to Great Britain. So the kids, they physically got up out of their chairs and had to move to these locations, and discovered that trade wasn't probably as fair as it could be for all the people that were trying to make a profit.
Now, have you talked to your students about having gone to Colonial Williamsburg, or sharing some of what you've learned with them, as far as, like you said, the woman who portrayed a free black woman? And
they tried to encourage people to go back to their own classrooms and do the reenactments themselves, and I haven't quite mastered that yet. But they did also, as part of the Institute, we each received, and I think our whole building received, a subscription to electronic field trips that Colonial Williamsburg put on. So I did one of those in the beginning of the year about the ratification of the Constitution. And so the kids, if you have enough time to prepare them in advance, they can actually write questions and call in. They do 2 live performances a day so that the kids on the West Coast can also get it. And so they can call in and have their questions answered by the same guy who was our Patrick Henry while we were there. He was also on TV for that.
That sounds like it'd be really exciting. Are there other opportunities to bring history alive for kids, maybe in our community, or things that we're doing?
There are several reenactors around town. I think it was last year, there was a man visited who does our Andrew Carnegie, and we've had Amelia Earhart came out to Pearson Air Museum a couple of times. So I think anytime where you have someone who has a passion for history, if you can get them to share that with the kids are always engaged.
Or I'd like to take newspaper articles from now and then try to have them understand it through Patrick Henry's eyes, or George Washington's eyes, or Thomas Jefferson, about any of the number of pieces that come out, especially in the campaign season, how we're having politicians be able to pick sides one or the other. Well, how would that have been interpreted historically?
And how do the kids do with that?
They like that it's from now, that it's not something that's old and dead, but it's something that they know they're going to be able to vote on in the next 4 years.
8th graders are at just the right age to really start paying attention to the world around them and wanting to know why things are the way they are. I was able to do something this year where we looked at the Declaration of the Occupy Wall Street and compared it to the Declaration of Independence. And the kids could see a lot of similarities and also some differences, and so that was a fascinating activity for them.
So is this something that you'll continue using in the classroom in the years to come?
I think so. I mean, going to the Institute, there is a segment for teachers that we can continue to look at lessons there. And the more time we have to dive into those lessons, we can incorporate more and more, and look forward to doing so. And I think that, when we're excited about history, our kids get excited about history. And this was just one avenue that we could use to really have fun with what we've learned.
Now, I want to go back to something we had said earlier about the fact that you're humanities teachers, and perhaps for those folks who are watching that don't understand what humanities is, could somebody maybe explain what that is versus a history class?
As a humanities teacher, you're responsible for teaching everything related to language arts, which is reading, writing, literature, reading strategies, then you're responsible for everything that's related to social studies, such as government, civics, history, geography, and it's put all into one, and you're supposed to try to understand reading and writing through the lens of history.
Okay. So I can see then how, again, going back to Colonial Williamsburg, there's a lot of things that you can actually apply. What was your favorite part, Michelle, of the whole trip?
I think I really enjoyed the reenactors and their passion for history. And also, I had a big realization there about how much everything is cyclical. I think there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't say to Jed or Nicole, this is just like such and such today. And we were constantly making connections. And I think that's the thing I would like most to bring to my students, is to get them to understand the connections between the past, the present, and likely the future as well.
What about you, Nicole? What was your favorite part?
I would say Jamestown. It was really interesting to learn about it in the history book, but to actually step foot where some of our first settlers were, and to see the challenges that they faced, but yet they were still willing to go on and to make a future for themselves, and the hard work that the people in the past have put forth to help us where we are today.
So in addition to just being in Colonial Williamsburg, I mean, there was some side trips, or?
We went to Jamestown and Yorktown, and we did quite a few studies at what used to be a segregated school. So we were able to go around the greater Williamsburg area, substantial amount.
All right. Well, and I know you mentioned it before, but I just think it bears repeating how it all came about that you were able to do this, with the foundation and Mr. Lynch. So is there anything you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, the people at the foundation and the people of Vancouver just need to be really appreciative of Ed Lynch. He's given a number of items to charity, whether it's Southwest Washington Hospital or to the Evergreen School District or the Evergreen Foundation, that he's responsible for a lot of the good that happens in this community.
That's great. Well, it's also my understanding that you were not the first group to go, that we've actually sent teachers. Have you had the opportunity to talk with anyone who'd gone before, or are you in contact still with the folks from Covington? Or?
I have talked to the folks at Covington a couple of times and talked about some of the lessons, but I actually haven't met any of the other people who've gone in previous years. I know they try to vary it where some years they'll send elementary teachers, some years middle school, and some years high school. So
do you think this was a valuable experience for you? Or?
Absolutely. I love the study of humanity. When we're able to take the myth, and we have a tendency in history to make everybody into heroes, so we don't understand them as people. But when you understand that those first people that came over to Jamestown, those were people just looking for a better life. A lot of them were chasing $1. But at the same point in time, there's a lot of risk. They're still risking their lives. Or we look at George Washington, and we have, the famous myths, but he was also a man, and he was also a great leader, and there's a reason he had such great qualities that made him into that legend. Or Patrick Henry, and how brilliant he was, that at any point in time there'd be 4 people writing down every word he said, because he didn't write out his speeches. He was brilliant, and to be able to understand these people as people, that allows me to understand our people now as people. And that's important.
I think the other thing, as humanities teachers, when you combine language arts and social studies, I come to it from a language arts background. So anytime I can have an experience where I get to meet with experts in historical topics, just increasing my background knowledge and my passion for it, I think translates into the classroom.
That's great. Well, I want to thank the 3 of you for spending some time and talking to us about Colonial Williamsburg.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
This program is being provided by the 15 members of the Vancouver Educational Telecommunications Consortium, TV, etc.